Hello class. We're going to go ahead and cover part 2 now of section 5.1. Keep in mind that you should have all the GCFs in common, become familiar with them. So let's take a look at this first one from number 2A. Once again, this is coming from your worksheet. So once again, it's 2A. And let's take a look at that first one there. So we've already discussed what the GCF could be for these. It could be a number, it could be a variable, it could be a combination of number and variable, or it could even be a polynomial. So if we take a look at this one, we're always going to start off whether we have a common coefficient, in other words, a number. So in this case, we have the two terms. We have the 3x squared plus the 6x to the third. We're going to start off with the numbers themselves. Here you have 3 and here you have 6. So the GCF, the largest number that is divisible into those two, is obviously going to be 3. But that's not the only GCF that we have in common. If you take a look, both of these terms also have the variable in common. So once again, keep in mind that when you're dealing with the variable, we're choosing the smallest power. So in this case, the smallest power here is x squared. So that is our GCF for this one. So first things first, always identify your GCF. So that's what we're going to factor out, the 3x squared. Now remember, when you're dealing with the numeric part, you're dividing. When you're dealing with the variable part, you're subtracting. So let's first start off with the first term here. So we're going to divide 3 by 3. So that'll give you 1. And we factor out x squared, which is not going to leave us with a variable. So we're forced to put a 1 right there. Once again, it looks weird, but it'll make sense in a little bit once we check it. So that takes care of the first term right there. Same thing here. The 6, we could divide the 6 by 3. It goes twice. So we're going to put 2 there. And we're also going to factor out the x squared from x to the third, which means we're taking it away. So if we take away x squared from x to the third, we're left with x. And we close the parentheses there. Once again, if you redistribute the 3x squared times 1 will give you 3x squared. And 3x squared times 2x will give you 6x to the third. Once again, if you haven't done the last two sections of multiplying polynomials in chapter 4, you gotta do that one. That is the most important one there. Next, same thing. Now this one's a little bit different. Notice that they're adding more things to it. In this particular case, we have the 8 and the 32, but we also have 2 variables instead of 1. Same process. First, identify the GCF. So in this case, the GCF, we take a look at the numbers. The largest number that is divisible into 8 and 32. And yes, there's a number of them, but in this particular case, the largest number that we can divide both of them by is 8. The same thing with the variables. Remember, all of the terms have to have the same variables in common, or else you cannot factor. So here we have a squared and here we have a. So we're going to choose the smallest of those two. So it'll be the a. And the same thing with the b squared and the b. Once again, both terms have b. So we're going to factor out the b. So that is your GCF for this one. Your GCF is going to be 8AB. So we're going to go ahead and first divide the 8 by 8, which will give you 1. Once again, if you want to put it, that's up to you, but you don't have to. If you factor out the a from a squared, you're left with an a, because remember, you're taking it away from here. Same thing with the b. We're factoring out b from b squared, so we're left with b. So that takes care of your first term right there. Our next term, we're going to go ahead and divide the negative 32 by 8, which will give us negative 4. And if we factor out the a and the b from this, we have no a, we have no b left. So that'll be our answer right there. So once again, this takes a little bit of time to understand, but it's not a big deal here. So far we've done these two right here, so they're a little bit different from what we started at the beginning. The next problem comes from 5.1 from your additional exercises, and it's going to be number 1 right there. So you notice that this one's a little bit different because we have more terms. In this case, we have 3 of them. So sometimes when you have more terms here, what you're going to have to do, instead of working horizontally like we've been used to so far, we could go ahead and do it straight from below right there. The same thing, except that we're taking a look at this. So we have a 6, we have a 9, we have a 15. So the GCF, first of all, what is the largest number that could go into 6, 9, and 15? So remember, it has to be divisible into all 3 of them. In this case, it'll be 3. And if we take a look, all of them have m's. But we're going to choose the smallest of the powers. In this case, it'll be the m squared. So your GCF, in other words, the part that you're going to factor out here, is 3m squared. So we're going to prepare this trinomial right there. So 6 divided by 3, that gives you 2. You factor out m squared from m to the 6, that's m to the 4th. 9 divided by 3, that'll be 3. And we factor out m squared from n to the 4th. So once again, we're taking it away, so that'll be m squared. And then we have negative 15 divided by 3, which will give you negative 5. And we're factoring out m squared from there, so we have no m left. Once again, if you want to check your answer, all you have to do is redistribute that 3m squared to all of those terms right there. So it doesn't matter whether you have 1 term, 2 terms, or 3 terms. The fact that you have to figure out the GCF first to figure out what you need to extract or factor out from each of them. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and return back to your first page, to 5.1. So we're going to take a look at number 2D, this one right here. So in this particular case, once again, we have to identify what our GCF is. So once again, it's very similar to the previous one that we just did, but we're going to go ahead and take a look at this. So we have 15, we have 18, and we have 27. Once again, if we take a look here, the GCF, in this case, the number that they have in common is the 3. And then we take a look at the variables. This one has x, but this middle one doesn't have x. This one has x. Remember, when it comes down to the variables and also to the numbers, it has to be all or nothing. Since we don't have an x for that middle one, we cannot factor out an x. So now we go on to the next variable, which is your y. You have a y here, you have a y for the second term, but you don't have a y for the last term. So we cannot factor out a y there. So if we take a look at the next one here. So in this particular case, so far we can't factor out an x, we can't factor out a y. How about a z? In this case, we cannot factor out a z because what? This one doesn't have a z. So as far as variables are concerned, we are not going to be able to factor out a variable here. The only thing that we're going to be able to factor out is the number. So in this case, it'll be the 3. So once again, just because it has variables doesn't mean that we're going to factor on. Remember, all of the terms have to have that in common. So first of all, we're going to go ahead and divide 15 divided by 3, which will be 5. And since we are not going to do anything with the x and the y, we leave it alone. Same thing with the 18. 18 divided by 3, that's -6. And we bring down the y and the z. Finally, we have the last term, which is 27. So 27 divided by 3, that'll give you -9. And we bring down the x and the z. So that gives us our answer for this. So once again, do not assume that because we have variables that we're going to go ahead and factor it. It just depends on what you end up with. Let's try one more. Take a look at letter F. Once again, this comes from your worksheet. So letter F right there. We also have another trinomial there. So let's take a look here. We have 15x squared minus x squared y minus 25x y squared plus 20xy. All right, so it's pretty obvious as far as what we need to factor out as far as the number is concerned. All of them are divisible by 5. And then we're going to take a look at the variables. Well, this one has x, this one has x, and this one has x. So remember, we're going to factor out the smallest power. In this case, it'll be x. The same thing with the y. All of them have y in common, so we're going to factor out the smallest power of the y, which is y. So that'll be your GCF for this one. The GCF will be 5xy. So that's what we're going to factor out. We're going to factor out the 5xy. Now remember, when you're factoring here, you're dividing with a number, and with the variables, you're taking it away. You're subtracting it. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. 15 divided by 5, that'll give you 3. You're taking away x from x squared, so you're left with x. And you're taking away the y from the y, so we have no y left. So that takes care of the first term. You repeat the same process for the next one. -25 divided by 5, that gives you -5. And we factor out the x. It's the same power, so we're not going to have an x left. And we factor out the y from y squared. We're left with a y. All right, so we're almost getting there. So that takes care of the second term there. We're going to do the same thing for the last term. 20 divided by 5, that gives you 4. We factor out the x. From here, we have no x left since it's the same power. And the same thing with the y. We factor out the y, so we have no y left. And this will be your end result. All right, so this concludes part 2 of section 5.1. The next one that we're going to be dealing with is factoring out a polynomial.